Hello and welcome to another edition of From the Pastor's Heart. Today I'd like to talk with you about something that is incredibly important to me. That over the years, I mean, as a pastor, I've been, I don't want to use the word accused, but folks have pointed out some things about me. That if you have been around me for any length of time, you know that I am absolutely convinced, and I will teach that the irreducible core of the Christian faith, for example, is to love God, love people, and to make disciples as we go on our way. That I am also convinced that sin is deciding for ourselves what's right and wrong. And so if you were to ask anybody who has been in any church that I have pastored for any length of time, and you call them at 2:00 in the morning, they should be able to tell you that sin is deciding for ourselves what's right and wrong. But lately, the one thing I have really I've been kind of been taken to task for, and this is by believers, has been my I'm going to use the word my pro-life stance, even though I don't particularly like that particular term. I believe that murdering innocent children is a bad idea, and I actually want to see that barbaric practice abolished. So I would technically be called an abolitionist, not a pro-life person. But either way, there have been folks who have said that, Dan, you're a little bit too out of me. You spend too much time on this. Well, I want to address that today as a pastor. Now, besides the fact that Jesus said that if anyone were to cause a child to stumble, it will be better that he had a millstone tied around his neck and have him tossed into the sea, and that the Bible has spent a lot of time talking about the need to protect those who are the weakest among us. But I want to take a look at this theologically. And I actually got this. I cannot remember the guy's name, and I apologize for that. But I was listening to somebody speak just the other day, and he made a very profound observation. And he said that abortion is the sacrament of Satan. And then he began to talk about language and the fact that, what is the only argument that we have for abortion today? The only argument that people use is the fact that women need to have control over their bodies, and that if a child is going to get in the way of a woman reaching whatever goals they have, then that child needs to die. Now, of course, for men who are not real men, who are actually quote unquote pro-abortion, the major reason that they are is because they just simply don't want to be saddled with the responsibility of having to pay for somebody, and it's much easier to kill the child than to take responsibility. That is the bottom line there. So, like I say, women, if you ever find a man who is who is in favor of abortion, run from him, because he's not going to care about you or your kids. But I got to thinking about this, and as he was talking about it, I said, just look at the words. Besides the fact that abortion is all about you kill the child for the person. But what did Jesus do? Jesus said that he came to give his life for others. And so it's just the exact opposite of what Jesus did. And then just even the language that we use in communion, where Jesus at that Last Supper, what did he say? This is my body, which is what? Which is given for you. Well, what is the language of the pro-abortion people? It's my body. This is my body that I can take something from somebody else so that I am able to do more with my body. Do you see that? It's an absolute perversion of what God set up. It's not about sacrifice. No, it's about selfishness. And I hear people all the time that Dan, you just don't care. You don't care. What about someone's life? Okay, folks, first of all, there's never a reason to murder a child to save a woman's life. That if you need to give birth early, that I get that. But that's not the same thing as reaching in there and actually destroying her, sucking its brains out. Okay, so let's just put that one off the table, because it's not true. And then if you go from there, you see, because of the selfishness and the sacrifice that we're willing to sacrifice kids, that's where the transgender nonsense comes from and everything else. And now we can mutilate kids, again, so that parents can feel good about themselves and so we can ultimately ruin lives, because that's ultimately what Moloch wants to do. And so when we are going into, whether it's politics or whatever it is that we are looking at, folks, for the first time that I know of in the history of our country, that we actually have a choice. We have a choice between somebody who wants to murder children and somebody who wants to murder children. The only difference is ultimately it's about 4% difference between the two. And so, am I a single issue voter? Yes, I am. Why is that? Because if somebody is not willing to defend and take care of the weakest among us, and if they're okay with the death of innocents, where does it stop? Are they going to care about anybody else either? And the answer to that is no. Just look at what was going on at the DNC 2 weeks ago. It was all about death. It was all about joy, but joy was all about death. It's disgusting. But folks, remember the enemy, Satan himself. He's the thief. He comes in to do what? To steal, kill, and destroy. And so in our society, and unfortunately the church has been a part of this, that we're going to be okay with this, that we're going to make excuses for those who want to murder the weakest among us. Folks, it's time for us to stand up and say no. Because it does matter if we're going to stand up for the folks who are weaker. That's what Jesus told us to do. That's what the early church did. Did they win political power? No. But the problem is that too many people just want to be able to say Merry Christmas and have a seat at the table. Or we have this idea that some person is going to save us. And the thing I'm seeing right now across my social media feed ultimately is this: we have to kill the kids in order to save the kids. Folks, that's demonic. It's just wrong. So if you see me on my social media feeds, I will never stop. As long as there is breath in my body, I will do whatever I can to speak up for those who are the weakest among us. And I would pray that the men would step up, that the church would step up, and that we would send a message and say this is unacceptable. Because as long as we allow this, it's going to continue. And then we need to understand, folks, the kingdom of the world is the kingdom of the world. It's buoyed up by the spirit of the age. And the only way the church is going to actually make a difference is if we stand in contrast to the kingdom of the world. And the place that we do that, the first place that we do that, is by protecting the weakest among us. So, I don't know if I'm going to pray that you're encouraged by these words or not, but I just needed to get that out. And I thank you for listening to my rant. And next week we'll probably hopefully have something a little bit nicer to say. But I just pray that, again, that you have a wonderful time with your siblings in Christ as you worship the Lord this week. And I look forward to seeing you again in a future video. God bless you all.